Last time, in a world of Dragon Ball Z, a legendary presence was felt. Having voiced the unstoppable body-switching captain of the mighty Ginyu Force and lending his booming signature style to the events that defined a generation, his voice was the very first to tell us what would happen next time on Dragon Ball Z. And now, he faces his greatest challenge yet, an interview from a warrior eager for knowledge. Will he survive the grilling? What secrets of the Dragon Ball Z universe will be unleashed? The fate of this discussion, and perhaps the entire fandom, starts now.
So I am joined here by the legendary Dale Kelly, as y'all may know him as the voice of Captain Ginyu, but also the epic voice of the narration of Dragon Ball Z. Thank you for joining me, Dale Kelly.
The guy who actually created an internet meme. I can't believe that, dude. Somebody told me that about 3 or 4 months ago, and I just started laughing. Can't believe those 5 words have turned into internet meme.
Yes, it's been going around. You know, like I usually like to believe that you're one of the voices of like our generation, like the generation that grew up with Dragon Ball Z, and when it first came over to American television, and just hearing that opening narration, then hearing the epic words of next time on Dragon Ball Z, just one of the voices of our generation, I believe.
Got to be a little bit lower, man. You got to do next time on Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, I wasn't really trying, but we'll get to it. When it comes to Dragon Ball Z, I believe it's like one of those, gateway animes. Usually when people are asked, what's like the first anime you watch? What is that anime that got you like into watching anime? More times than none, a lot of people will say Dragon Ball Z. And, just saying thank you to you in general, to just being a part of Dragon Ball Z and, being in narration, being Captain Ginyu and other characters, and just being able to be a part of that. What was it like what's it like just being a part of Dragon Ball Z in general?
Well, nobody knew that it was going to do what it did. When we're doing the show, I mean, everybody just, most of the people that I did the show with all got the gig the same way. They answered an ad on the back of the Dallas Observer cartoon show looking for voice talent. And lucky for me, I had been in radio a long time before that. I owned a recording studio in Dallas at the time. So my mom was actually visiting my studio. I tell this story all the time. It's the truth. She was visiting my studio. I'm busy mixing down a band, and she read that ad and looked at me and says, "You do this shit for a living. Why don't you go apply?" So I did. Right. So I got the Ginyu gig. And as I was leaving, one of the voice directors looked at me and said, "Hey, man, did you ever used to do any of those drag racing commercials when you were in radio?" I said, "Oh, you mean those Sunday? You mean those?" And that's how I ended up being the narrator of the show. But, nobody knew that it was going to do what it did. And, it didn't, it wasn't the kind of gig that you could like make a living at. It was just a part-time thing because it didn't pay very much and there were no residuals. But it was fun to do. Everybody had a good time doing it. And, and I enjoyed it. I did Captain Ginyu for a while. I think he's only in like 18 episodes, I want to say, something like that. And then, and then did the rest of the narration all the way up and through the Cell Saga. And then I got a chance to write and score the music to the Trunks and Bardock movies. And then after that is when we parted ways. But I had a great time while I was there.
Yeah. Different things I hear about, some of the early days of Funimation, ups and downs here and there about the whole industry and all that stuff. But is there maybe like a behind the scenes story that is like maybe one of your favorites from that era?
I don't have a lot of favorites because, we had some issues, which is why I ended up leaving the show because of the soundtracks to the 2 movies and what I tried to do. But I had a lot of fun there. I had a lot of good times with the people that were working there. On the one hand, I think those early days of Funimation, a lot of the difficulties, mistakes, whatever got made, I think got simply made because those guys had never been in the entertainment business before. And I had, like a lot of people. I mean, I think me, Mark, and Stephanie had all been in the business for a while. I don't know about that, some of the other guys, because some of the other guys had been in and out. But Mark, Mark Britton, who played Birder, he was a stand-up comedian, and Stephanie Nadolny was she was a lead singer in Vince Vance and the Valiants for like 10 years, I think, or something. So, I mean. There's a lot to be said. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm glad that because I turned down the narration gig at first because it didn't pay any money, and I'm making good money in my own studio, and I got to drive from Dallas to Fort Worth to do the show. And one of the few things I can say positive about them that I really appreciate is the fact that after a couple of weeks, they called me back and said, "Hey, dude, what's it going to take?" Because they really wanted me to do it. They auditioned Mark and some other people, from what I understand. And I said, all right, tell you what I'll do. We worked out a deal where, because, I made the point to them. It's like, look, as the narrator, I'm the last voice of the show. So, you can finish all this stuff before it ever goes to the Cartoon Network or Toonami. So we made a deal where they would get 4 or 5 episodes together. And then I'd go out there and spend the whole day, or as long as I could before I blew my voice out doing 4 or 5 episodes. And that made it worth me going out there to do it. And it made it worth it for them. And, for, like I said, for what, almost, I guess, 3 years, maybe a little more. Everything was great. And then, I tried to I tried to make them a bunch of money and turn all the movies into basically the movie Heavy Metal. That was the pitch, because I'd been in radio for so many years that I knew every rock band on the planet. I mean, you can imagine the Scorpions and Journey and Sammy Hagar and all these guys that I knew being on those soundtracks, but, one thing led to another. It didn't work out. And, we kind of parted ways, and I ended up with a distribution deal through Universal Music Group and had my own label for 7 years. So, well, a lot of you guys missed out, and it really, I hear a lot of great stories, and I want to take this opportunity to thank every single one of the fans out there, because you guys are the ones that kept me alive. I mean, there've been 5 narrators for that show, and you guys remember me. And I constantly hear those stories, and it just makes me giggle and laugh that after all these years and all the years I've been in entertainment business, I'm famous for those 5 words, and I'm not complaining. It's great. But it is kind of funny that all the stuff I've done, and, because, I mean, when I first got to Dallas, I was running KZEW, and I was the #1 midday guy there. That's years before I did that. But that's how I ended up in Dallas in the first place, was in the late 80s. So I've had a lot of fun in this business. I've done pretty much everything you can do in this business. And I guess one of the coolest things about this is I started out in morning radio. And going out and meeting you guys and hanging out and signing autographs and stuff, it's like back in the day when we used to do remotes and we'd go out and hang out at the record store or car dealership, meet the fans and hang out with them. This is exactly like that, which was the most fun I ever had in radio. So I'm having as much fun as you guys, trust me, and I'm grateful to every single promoter that invites me out, because it's mind-boggling the effect you made on people. Because you don't feel that in the booth, when you're just doing the show and you leave and go home, you don't. Some of the stories I have heard the last, well, it'll be 2 years in April that I started doing this, have made me giggle, have brought me to tears, have made me just shake my head going, oh my God, never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would make that kind of an impact on people. So I'm having way too much fun, man. Just like I'm gonna down there, and the 2 weeks when we come down to Pop Culture Con, that's gonna be a ball.
Yeah. So when it comes to like voice acting, you hear different stories. Like a lot of stories you hear about is like sometimes maybe once in the blue moon they might have like a whole cast session, or you might do solo sessions. Which ones did you like kind of do more?
We all did solo sessions back then. You got to remember something. This isn't in a studio. This is on the 3rd floor of a bank building in a vocal booth with a little mixer sitting on a console in a conference room. That's where we started. Not like I think what they have, like somebody told me, I think Crunchyroll has 17 studios now in Dallas that they do all this stuff with. Plus, I guess Chris has his own thing. It's too funny because I've had 6 studios myself. I got one sitting here just collecting dust that I don't even use anymore.
Okay. Yeah. When it comes to acting in general, you hear different stories about difficulties with voice acting and playing these characters. Were there any like difficulties or challenges that you had when voicing like narration or Captain Ginyu?
Well, the narration is just my morning radio voice. It's how I sound at 5:30 in the morning. Harunga, when I did him, I had to go in the mornings and do him because that's like a half octave lower, and we weren't using a voice modulator or anything. That was just me, so I'd have to go in when I could get really really low. And then Captain Ginyu, those are all kind of in my range. I thought I did a better Piccolo than Chris, but Chris ended up doing Piccolo. But I thought my Piccolo was pretty good, but they said it sounded too much like the narrator, so we'll let that go. But most of the people you're going to talk to spent their living as voice actors. That's not me. I've been in this business 42 years, and Dragon Ball Z was a lot of fun, but it was just one gig in a long history of being in the entertainment business. I mean, I've been in front of the camera, behind the camera, recorded albums. I was on radio. I've been on television. I've owned production companies. I retired as a union lighting, sound, and video engineer from a showroom here in Vegas that I ran for 10 years. So, like when I do panels at the conventions, if I'm doing my own panel, I do Dale Kelly, Dragon Ball Z, or A Life in Entertainment. Because so many people come up to us and go, hey, man, what's it like to be a voice actor? Can I be a voice actor? Can I do this? First of all, you're not going to get in it the way any of us did. Like I started in radio and just backdoored my way into it, like so many people. Now they want real actors. They want actors, not people with great voices. They want actors with voices. And it's a lot different than it was then. There are places you can audition online, and if you get the gig, then you can get the gig. There are schools like Bob Carter, a couple of my contemporaries. Chuck Huber's got one. Bob Carter's got one. Those guys, they teach the fundamentals. Just like back in the day, I actually taught broadcasting at community college up in Reno, Nevada for a little while. And one of my morning partners and one of my best friends taught for the Columbia School of Broadcasting. But even that, there's certain things about this business that you try to impress upon people. One of them is the fact that where I come from, you're expected to have talent. It's not a big deal that you have talent. Everybody has talent, right? You're supposed to have talent before you even try this. What I talk to people more about is passion, because, man, this life is 90% disappointment, maybe even 95% disappointment, but 5% for some of us makes it all worthwhile. Just like the Dragon Ball thing. All the stuff I went through with Funimation and everything else. I did a show here at a toy store. A guy came up to me on a Friday, said that him and his brother, only thing they ever did together without fighting was watch Dragon Ball. So he tells me one day his brother gets up on a motorcycle, takes off after they watch the show, gets in a wreck, and gets put in a coma. He's in the coma for 6 months, and the doctors tell the family he's probably never going to wake up. This is the way he's going to be. They turned the show on one day. He heard my voice, and he woke up.
Wow.
What am I supposed to say to that?
Right.
I mean, I was in tears, man. I'm almost in tears just talking about it. And right then I thought to myself, you know what? All the crap I've ever gone through, my entire entertainment career was worth that one moment that I heard that story. And I've heard other stories like that too. And like I said, that's when you realize, oh my God, the effect I made on some people is just unbelievable. I mean, can you imagine a guy from a little station in Reno, Nevada, whose voice has now been heard by, according to some people, tens of millions of people? That's insane, dude, to think about that. I mean, it's one thing to think about, I had 500,000 listeners in Dallas, and, you're on radio, so that's a local thing, and you don't feel that. But to stop for a second and think about, and this came from a guy in England trying to get me to go over there because, our show was in England. It ran in England and Australia and stuff too. Yeah. I never took my career really serious, right? I was just another guy, just like you, just, having fun, doing something that I enjoy and stuff. Then you stop and think about it once in a while and look around and go, holy crap, dude, I can't believe this. So I'm very nostalgic and very humble. And I honestly, that's one of the reasons I do the shows. I mean, I was retired. I really don't have to go out and do this. I didn't really need the money or anything, but I missed hanging out with people and to hear those stories. Like, I've got my own game called Cycles of War. I write books and I created my own IP. I've been working on off and on for many years. Well, at the Dallas Card Show, I hook up with a guy who runs trading card cons. They fall in love with the game, and now all of a sudden they're sponsoring me, and I'm going on a tour with them for 7 different cons to promote the game and get my books out and stuff. So it's a lot of fun being retired. It really is. And like I said, man, I'm just forever grateful to you and guys in pop culture and everybody who supports me out of the blue and kept me alive.
Mm-hmm. And we thank you also too. Like I said, you're one of those voices that we hear, and it's kind of like a voice of a generation, one of the voices of our generation when we saw Dragon Ball Z for the first time, when it came to American television and all that, and you hear other voice actors and other celebrities talk about, fan stories and all that stuff. And the story you just told, a very heartfelt story, very touching and all that, so just from the fans and everybody, just say thank you to you, just being a part of this universe that we love and just being one of those voices for us. It's amazing.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, you realize how freaky it is to say something like that to me when, like, James Earl Jones and Sam Elliott and Casey Kasem, those guys are iconic voices. They're iconic voices to me because I was in that side of the business. For you guys to say that about me is just so humbling. It's not funny. It really is, man.
Yeah, when it comes to Dragon Ball Z and just the anime in general, with it being like, sort of that gateway anime to, people's first anime they ever watched, it got them into anime. And, just for myself in general, I remember being a young kid, playing on playground, pretending to go Super Saiyan and doing Power Blast and stuff like that. And then just watching the show, with my siblings also, and just being able to be engulfed into this universe, this show, this anime. It was just one of those shows that were just epic on a scale. And just hearing your voice in the opening narration really sets the tone for, like, the show, sets the tone for the episode coming up. But then we get to the end of the episode and then we hear your voice come on, and it's almost like a sense of
everybody's
dread.
mad at me.
Right. It's almost like a sense of dread. It's like, oh, the episode is ending already. Damn. But in a sense, we still get to hear your awesome voice, though, to end off the episode.
Guy told me once, he said, I have a real love-hate relationship with you.
Right.
I went, okay, you got to explain this to me. He says, when the show would end and I'd hear your voice next time on Dragon Ball Z, I'd be mad as hell because the show was over. So then you'd start talking about the next episode and what's coming up. Then I'd be okay. And I just started laughing. I said, well, it's a good thing we ended on a positive note. But, I started doing that Dragon Ball Z, that particular phrase, like 3-4 episodes in. I knew that was just going to be something. I didn't know what, but I knew it was going to be some kind of an iconic thing. And I told him that. I said, look, I got to end the show like this, every time. I'll do this time and coming up and all that. But, I had to end it with next time on Dragon Ball Z. And see, if you remember right, of the 5 narrators, one of the things that people ask me, why I think I'm so different. I approach that thing more like a character in the show than a narrator. And if you listen to it, the one thing I did that nobody else seemed to have figured out, I took Dragon Ball Z and split it into 3 separate words. Think about how I do it. Next time on Dragon Ball Z. 3 separate, that made an impression on people. Kyle took over when I left. All right. We got in that fight over royalties. I was gone. They called Kyle and said, hey, you got to sound like Dale. The other 2 guys, or the other 3 guys, I guess, got cast in it at one point or another. So there were 5 total. And yet I'm the one everybody remembers. And well, it's because I was a character in the show as well. You know what I was? I tell people this all the time. I finally figured it out. I'm the guy sitting around the campfire telling the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All the way through. That was me. That was telling the story to people. When I thought about it that way, it all made sense. Somebody told me my voice appears in that show more than anybody else's.
Yeah.
That's crazy if you think about it. with all the characters and especially with Sean and Chris, all the voices they did. And yet me, because I'm the narrator, I appeared more than anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty funny when you think about it.
When it came to like the process of you being cast as the narrator and Captain Guinea, was there like a sort of process you went to become, be able to come up with the voices for those?
Actually, not really. I mean, Captain Ginyu, nobody had ever done before, because that was when they just brought it down from the Ocean dub. So I kind of did. And that matter of fact, I got to admit, when I first started doing this autograph thing, I had to go online and remember how I did Captain Ginyu, because the narrator's fun. The narrator, like I said, is just my morning radio, and Paranga's even deeper. But Captain Ginyu, I thought I started out a little more sing-songy than he ended up being. It's kind of more an up and down thing that I did in the cast, but it seems like the more episodes I watched, I kind of settled into that kind of one voice, just like that, which is kind of that was kind of the thing that I ended up with Ginyu. So, and then, possessed Goku and possessed Bulma. The day I had to go in and do Bulma, I started laughing because it's like, all right, because they said, well, you got to be Bulma today. What? Yeah, you got to be Bulma today. Ginyu possesses Bulma. I said, all right, so what am I supposed to do? Well, kind of sound like a female Captain Ginyu. Yeah, all right. Let's give it a shot. So, but yeah, I tell people all the time, I said, you remember I was also cast as Goku. What? Yeah, I was possessed Goku. Oh, that's right. I actually heard Funko might have brought out a possessed Goku at one point, but I don't think they're going to. But I heard they were going to bring out a Goku with a scouter. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking about telling Peter and Sean and all those guys, hey, man, you guys can't sign that one. That's my Goku. You guys get all the other ones, but that one's mine.
Right.
Yeah, that was, like I said, the narrator gig was just, as I'm leaving, Barry asked me if I did those radio spots. And I said, yeah, and that's how I got that. And then Paranga, they just needed a really deep voice to do Paranga when he came up. I said, yeah, I can do it.
So you were mentioning how you kind of came up with the music for the specials of Bardock and the history of Trunks. What was the process of that? Where you bring this American rock into this.
Okay, so I've told this story a few times too. So it was about, I don't know, 2-3 years in, I guess. And I went in one day. And I went into Gen's office, or Daniel's office, and Gen was in there. And I sat down and I told him, the internet says your music sucks. and since I spent my time in radio all the time, all those years, I could take your movies and turn them into the movie Heavy Metal. So they got all excited, and we signed a contract. And then some stuff happened, and then all of a sudden it's like I got to rush and get through the Trunks and Bardock movies. So the Trunks movie. Dream Theater were good friends of mine, and they just sent me their whole catalog. Bootsy and Buckethead, I knew Bootsy, Mark Slaughter and Dana Strum from Slaughter, and some other people. So I did the first movie with that, and then we got me and Funimation got in an argument over not wanting to pay anybody any royalties because they wanted it all be work for hire, and those bands can't do work for hire. Mark and I can, but they can't. So the second movie, I went to my friend at one of the labels and went and explained my situation, that I only had a little bit of money to pay for each band, and I needed some bands for the second movie. Could he help me out? And you got to remember, I ran progressive rock stations, and I was the only station in the top 50 markets without a consultant when I ran KZEW in Dallas. So he laughed on the phone. He goes, dude, I got a stack of 20 CDs on my desk right here. We don't know what the hell to do with them, and we own the publishing. So tell you what, I'll send them to you. You pick 4 of them. Pick the singles that we'll release on the albums, and you can use them, and we'll take care of the royalties. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, yeah, absolutely. I said, okay, cool. So those bands turned out to be the first place you ever heard Saliva, Sum 41, Caviar, and American Hi-Fi. All 4 of those bands broke their teeth or cut their teeth on that Bardock soundtrack. Well, I still had a whole movie to do. So my friend Mark Aiken was a guitar teacher at Murphy's Music, and I want to say he was a Digitech rep. And I called him and I said, hey, man, I got to do this. I got to do this second movie soundtrack. You want to come over and help me do it? So in the back of my motorhome, which I had a recording studio in, I sat in front of a computer with a couple keyboards and Mark and his guitar amp and drum machine. and a Digio 1 Pro Tools system. And unlike all the other movies, that's the only movie that was actually created like a John Williams feature film, because we sat in front of that computer and wrote every single piece of music to every clip in the movie, which is why the Bardock movie sounds different than every other movie they did, and why the soundtrack fits it exactly, and why, as far as I'm told, it's still the number one selling video of all time for them. So, and it's also why you never heard the soundtrack, because I own it.
Wow.
I own both of them. And yeah, so I never put them out. I did put out some cool discs that have 5 songs from the Trunks movie that every once in a while I'll bring out to a convention and shit, because I've got some promos left from the day, and I'll sell them to some people if they want them. But that was the most fun I had, and also how I ended up losing the gig. So, you know, bittersweet. But still, to this day, I wouldn't change it. I had way too much fun doing that, and I'm so proud of those soundtracks. And every fan that I meet that likes the movies, they all bring up the Bardock one, and I just start laughing when they do.
Right, because I for myself, I would say that's definitely one of my favorites, and just the music just puts it over that, you know, puts an epicness to it.
It fits completely. Like I said, we wrote, especially that death scene and all that stuff, man. I mean, we wrote that specifically to that. You know, the Trunks movie, I tried to take, you know, different people's music and lay it in to fit the mood and stuff, right? And that's what they tried to do. You know, they went after I left, they tried to go around me and do the same thing. You know, it was a great idea, but I don't think they ever pulled it off like we did with those two. I mean, I know they had Pantera and the Deftones and some other guys on Broly and some of the other soundtracks and stuff, but they never pulled it off the way I did, or the way I probably could have for the rest. You imagine if I would have done all those movies, knowing Metallica and knowing, you know, every rock band that was ever on radio from the late 70s to the early 90s, because I broke all their records. I knew them all. Those soundtracks would have been unbelievable.
Sure, for sure they would have.
But, you know, it is what it is, you know?
Was there like any difficulties when it came to, like, you know, syncing up the music to the animation in general?
No, man, that was like so much fun. That was a bucket list thing for me, because I always knew I could do it. And I'd been a producer, you know, for years before that. But it was actually a labor of joy, dude, to sit there. Because, like I said, I ran progressive rock stations, and at KZW, I was there with no consultant. So I loved cutting edge music. And I I patterned that thing. You remember Batman Beyond?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, think about it. That was the first cartoon show that was actually rock-based. Mm-hmm. Think about that soundtrack. That was my inspiration right there, was that show.
No,
because I knew, you know, I mean, I'm doing Dragon Ball, and I'm watching that show, and it's like, oh, shit, this is the cutting edge right here. This is what shit's going to sound like. And that was my whole inspiration for going to them and say, hey, you know, this show over here? Yeah, they love this music. We could do that, you know? And I mean, look, at the end of the day, I didn't think it was going to end up the way it did, you know? But I mean, you know, it's their company. They can run it the way they want. And, you know, it is what it is.
No, like like you mentioning Batman Beyond, I remember that show as a kid. I love that show, you know, including with the Batman, the animated series from the 90s. And then you get into the Batman Beyond, which is many years later. And it's like, you're sort of futuristic, and you hear that sound, that rock sound in there. And just hearing that was pretty awesome too. Here you have the inspiration from that. That is pretty cool.
I'm telling you that, you know, I was a big cartoon fanatic like everybody else. I wasn't really a collector of anything, really. I mean, because I got so much stuff in radio, and a lot of it I gave away to other people because it meant more to them than it did to me, right? But I used to love those, you know, love watching like Pinky and the Brain and Animaniacs and, you know, just real creative cartoons, you know, and stuff. And Batman Beyond was all a part of that, you know, a couple of hours of cartoons and stuff. And man, the first time I heard that soundtrack and watched how the animation flowed and stuff and how that show was written, I was hooked. You know, and that's why I said when I went to Funimation, after a while, I just thought, man, I mean, this is what Dragon Ball should sound like in the United States. You know, it should have that kind of soundtrack. I wish they would have done it. I wish I could have done all the rest of the movies, because they would have been pretty cool. I mean, take the money aside, just the fact to be able to score all those movies like that with those kind of bands. Plus, you know, Mark and I would have still been writing music too to fill in stuff. So I mean, that would have been a lot of fun to do that, but shit, life throws you curveballs, and like I said, for me, getting the record deal with Universal Music Group, I mean, people struggled their entire lives trying to get a distribution deal with a label so they can, so they can actually put out product. And here, because I own those soundtracks, all of a sudden I get something I've been trying to get for 30 years. And all of a sudden I get a label, and it was awesome. I toured the country recording blues festivals with a live studio, put out a series called Along the Blues Highway, and just had a ball, I've had a lot of fun in the entertainment business. I really have. I enjoyed Dragon Ball and doing the movies and stuff, but I mean, I've just had a ball doing it all. Coming from a guy who was a Porsche parts and service manager and Volkswagen mechanic before I got into this.
No, it sounds like you had a pretty fun and fulfilling career throughout your throughout your life. So that's pretty awesome to hear. Just different stories, different things throughout your career, throughout your life that you enjoyed.
Yeah, I used to. I got to get enough Instagram followers to go back live again since they changed their rules. Right, you got to have at least 1,000 followers, and I don't pay attention to that stuff. That's your guys' generation, not me. But now that I have to, I used to do Tuesdays. I would talk about Dragon Ball and about what's going on in cons and stuff. But I got so many people bugging me because I would slip into stories once in a while that I started going on Thursdays and just had story night, where I would just tell different stories from my days in the entertainment business. Although I told everybody, no matter what, I can't give you the real names because these guys are all still friends of mine.
Like, you attend many cons and fan events, different things like that. And you say how one of your favorite things is just meeting fans in general, hearing the different stories they tell you and all that. Is there any other thing that you kind of enjoy about going to these fan events and cons?
Well, obviously, they keep you young. I mean, let's face it, look, at my age, you can do one of two things. You can sit around, be a hermit, watch TV, and just, check out. Or I look in the mirror and can't believe I'm 71. I still think I'm 35, 40. One of my friends said it best. He looked at me and said, you're making plans like you're 20 and you're 70. And I just started laughing because it's so true. I mean, I'm doing 20 some odd gigs this year. This from a guy who was sitting around doing nothing, happily retired. Now all of a sudden I'm working full time again. And I mean, I'm on one sense I'm happy, but I got to tell you, in another sense, when you retire, one of the weirdest things that happens, and you're going to notice this, remember this conversation years later. When you quit jobs, when you move jobs, you're always going back to work. You're always doing something. But when you retire, one day, week, a month, 2 months, maybe I don't know exact time frame, but I know every one of my friends has done this, has called me and laughed and said this happened to them. You're going to wake up one morning and two things are going to happen. The first one is you're going to look around and go, God, I don't have to do anything today. And the second thing is going to happen. All of a sudden, you're a 15-year-old kid again. It's the summer before you got a car. You can't go any place but sit around the house. And a day is a day. It's so long you can't stand it. When you get to be my age, you want a day to be a day. You don't want them to fly by like when you're working, where you're working for Friday, you're working for the weekend, you're working for the next vacation. All of a sudden, oh man, in 2 years I'll be here. In 3 years I'll be there. The older you get, the less you want to wish your life away. So in some sense, I love what I'm doing, but there's a little part of me that was still wishing I was just sitting around doing nothing, and a day was a day because, they're starting to fly by again. I started doing this stuff a year ago, April, and now all of a sudden it's 2 years I've been doing signings, and it's just flown by. So it is it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. It's a velvet cage. It's whatever you want to say. There's a lot of great things about it, but the fact is I've still been around the sun 71 times. That don't change, So hopefully I'll have a lot of good years left, but yeah, still kind of funny that I'm doing this. I'm working on so many different things right now. It's not funny. And I'm laughing because it's like, why are you doing this stuff? Why are you building another company? Why are you doing that? I mean, you were done with all this and now you're doing it again. It's like, this is idiotic. But part of it's for my son, for my grandkids, just to keep me busy. you know, to hang out and get to visit with guys like you and, you know, and do shit and, you know, and just enjoy the day, you know. That's the addictive part about it. It really is.
Right. So whenever you're attending these kinds of events, what's one of the things that people get you to sign the most?
Well, my Narrator Funko. I actually make my own Narrator Funko. It's JSA certified as my Funko. I only make 100 of each one. I change them slightly every one. I'm bringing some down to the show down there. I've signed, I think, 4 now. I want to say this one's going to be 5. You know the Emerald City Comic-Con Pirangas?
Yeah.
I've signed 4 of those.
Okay.
They only made 200 of them, I think.
Mm.
See, because this is the one with the lizard with the dragon on the front, not the regular Piranga, the ECC one. And I've got another one coming right now that I think I'll have, well, unless I sell it this weekend. But if I don't, then I'll have it when I bring down those. Depending on the condition, those are $700-800 because I got to spend $400 or $500 for them. But all the stuff that I carry now, if you've ever seen Scott Innes's booth, Scott Innes was the voice of Shaggy and Scooby and Scrappy for like 10 years, right, for Hanna-Barbera. Well, Scott looks like a whole merchandise vendor's booth. Mine kind of looks.
I have seen him. Yeah, he has like a whole
mine kind of looks the same way now.
Okay,
mine's a good 20 foot. Now mine's a good. You know, I condense it down for some spaces, but at the bigger cons, I got a 10 by 20 now with all my stuff in it because people want me to sign every character I ever narrated for. I signed I've got Pirangas that I bring with me. I bring Shenrons because, you know, the Shenrons, people collect everybody's signature on those Shenrons, right? I've been the 18th, 19th signature on a bunch of them. So I bring the Shenrons now and start the process, you know, so that people can buy it from me and then get it, you know, Mark. And a lot of times I do shows with Mark and Dylan, who were part of the Ginyu Force. So we'll do a deal. Like I've got a few of those 5-packs left, you know, that were GameStop exclusives. They don't make anymore. So those I bring, and then, you know, the 3 of us will sign them if we're at shows, or, you know, we've got a way to sign them where the other 2 guys will sign them. So, and then the cards lately, I've been doing card shows, and a lot of people want, you know, my signature on their favorite, you know, trading card. So I've got a lot of trading cards and stuff. I've got something for everybody because it's just from the first day when all I did was prints to now, it's all been the fans going, gee, would you have this? Gee, could you have that? Like my hats. You know, I've got hats. I've got, you know, pretty much everything you can think of, you know. It's an interesting little booth, and I have a great time with it. People freak out because they see all the different characters and everything and all the different stuff. And then, like, when they see the narrator, they laugh their heads off because that guy actually looks like me. That's a funny thing about it. We actually tried to get a narrator Funko made for me. But Funko wouldn't return our phone call, even though we had the $100,000 that it cost to get your own Funko made back then. That's what we were told. It was $30,000 for a mold, and you had to buy 10,000 units at $7 a piece. So I have a friend who has got some cash, and he was laughing, said, "All right, let's go ahead and do it." I said, "Really?" He says, "Yeah, man, pull a trigger on him." Shit, we couldn't even get him on the phone. So, but dude, I've sold almost. I think I'm on the 5th iteration of the Narrator Funko, so at least over 450, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the only place I sign next time on Dragon Ball Z is a quote that comes with it. So everybody loves that.
Right. No, that sounds pretty cool. Honestly,
I'll have a bunch of them down there when I come down. You know, I'm packing everything up to take it. I'm actually in the process of getting a corporate apartment in Dallas because I do so much stuff down there. I'm based in Vegas, but I'm gonna have a place there too, so I can do the shows down in there plus the shows up here.
Right. So when it comes to me in general, I'm a big movie person. Do you happen to be a big movie person?
Oh yeah.
Enjoy movies, you know, going to the theater, all that, you know.
Not a big horror fan, but you know, I wrote a horror film that would scare the hell out of me to go watch. I'm more of an action, comedy, historical. I mean, I like a lot of that stuff, but I just never got into horror movies. I think monster movies freaked me out as a kid. You know, seeing the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms in black and white when you're 5 years old kind of freaks you out. That there's dinosaurs in San Francisco Bay.
Right. So, what would you say is maybe some of your favorite movies, or like just movies you like to go back to in general to watch?
Wow, what do I like to go back to and watch all the time? I do, you know what? I don't know if I have a real favorite that I like to do that. I've got a lot of movies that I really like for different reasons. Like, I love the Indiana Jones series until they made the last one, and I'm waiting for the next title, Indiana Jones in the Wheelchair. You know,
Right.
It's just sometimes they take a franchise and you think, oh my God, that was such a great film. And then they just kind of wreck it, trying to make money with it. Some of them are great. So, see, to me, like a lot of people, I thought that the whole Indiana Jones saga ended with The Last Crusade and was the perfect way to end it. They rode off in the sunset. Everything worked out great. That's it. That's it. Same with, you can say a lot about Tom Cruise and all the movies he makes. I like the original TV show Mission Impossible. It's how old I am. So there are times that he did really good with that franchise. And there's times that just, I could care less. Kind of like Star Wars. Everybody's, the problem, I think, with Star Wars, for example, is that because it's become a generational thing, like my son likes parts of Star Wars that I could care less about, because I like the original stuff because that's what I grew up with. So I even like 1, 2, and 3 because I like, I can check Jar Jar Binks at the door and like the storyline that helps me complete the 6 movies. Yet 7, 8, and 9, oh man, I could care less about them, because to me, knowing that there were stories out there like the Thrawn series and a couple of others that would have been amazing movies for 7, 8, and 9 and would have really done it, to take the cheap way out and just redo the old movies again, that speaks a lot about where Hollywood is, unfortunately. That's why when you say about movies, it's like, well, your generation doesn't get the same exposure to movies, to movie ideas, let's say, that mine did or my parents did, especially mine, because there's just like music. For some reason, there's so much creative music in the 70s and 80s, early 80s, that just never got repeated. I mean, how do you explain the fact that people still like The Who and the Stones and Led Zeppelin after 50 years, and they can't remember half the bands from the 90s that were just as big in the 90s when they were out? There's just certain things about certain films and music and stuff that make a huge impact, much like Dragon Ball, right? Same thing with Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball came out in 97. I think Dragon Ball came out, if I remember right, before it was even called animation. It was called Japanese anime. All right, Japanese animation. And the only shows, as far as I can remember, were Us and Sailor Moon. I mean, so for a lot of people, that was the introduction to a whole new art form, Japanese anime. And let's face it, in Japan, Japanese anime is soft pornography. This is the thing about that show, is that, it's why Bulma was in a thong all the time and Master Roshi had to be airbrushed. Why my friends in Mexico who did the Spanish version laugh about the fact that they got the unedited version. So for them, it was much funnier. And it was much more sexy. There was a lot of more sex in it, and there was a lot more violence in it. I mean, because like for the example I tell everybody that I remember the most is the part where Frieza kills Krillin. In the Mexican version, it's the full 3 episodes. But if I remember right, it was only 2 episodes here because they had to cut out so much of the blood and gore. But you got to remember, we were on the Cartoon Network. They had to take an R-rated show effectively and make it into a PG-rated show for kids. Now, the fact they pulled it off is pretty amazing when you think about it, given the fact they had to airbrush a lot of the characters and the shows and everything else. Like I said, Mario and Lalo would say that the Mexican edition was far more funnier and far more R-rated than ours was. And I think I want to say the unedited versions on the videotapes were the full length versions. I seem to. I have some of those in my garage, I think, and I haven't actually looked at them in forever. But I want to say that the unedited ones were the ones where they didn't have that done. But shit, that's a long time ago to remember.
Yeah, I remember growing up. I think it was on the videotapes because I had a few of the videotapes. They had like, when you stack them together, they make like this full picture and stuff on the spot.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
They had like the uncut, unedited versions on them, I believe.
Yeah, because I know there were 2 different versions went out. There was an edited and unedited version.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dale. Kelly, I appreciate your time for coming on and doing this interview with us. Like you were saying, you're going to be at next week's show for Pop Culture Con next weekend. So be excited to be able to meet you in person and, meet all the other guest celebrities that are going to be there also. So I just want to thank you for your time, for being in this
Appreciate
interview.
it very much, man. Yeah, I was just going to ask if you were going to be there because I'm looking forward to hanging out with you and meeting you.
Yes, I should be there. I'll probably be there maybe on Sunday.
Cool. Well, it's Saturday, Sunday. The show starts at 10, right? Because we should probably tell everybody that here at the end. Saturday, Sunday, 14th and 15th.
Yeah, it's like 10 or 11 start time, I believe. I'll run
right.
through it again.
And where is it again?
It's going to be, I believe, in Spring, Texas.
Yeah, in Spring, Texas. Yeah.
Just outside of Houston. So that'd be fun. They could be able to come check it out. That'd be fun. They could meet you. Maybe they'll get you to narrate something or, hear your voice that'd be pretty awesome to do.
Well, you never know. I could do it next time.
Right. So just want to thank you for coming on, and I appreciate you.
Well, thank you, my friend, and good luck, and hopefully we'll see you soon. All right. Take care, everybody.